I will pass on some newer tips and tricks. So one of the things that we used to have to rely on Acumatica for was updating a timeout period. It's probably one of the most common support requests that we get, which was, we are web-based software. Acumatica would force our users to log into the software after 30 minutes of inactivity. So if they walked away from their computer, they would have to re-log in after X amount of time. With the latest release of Acumatica, we don't have to rely on support anymore to do that. Acumatica has built in, so just to show that universal search, menu options, I can open up our security preferences, and you can see in here, I have the ability to choose my inactivity or timeout settings. So rather than having to put in a support request and we go to Acumatica and they change things on their end and we let you know, you have the ability to set this now, even though it's a hosted site. So really nice new feature. I'm sure they were tired of the support requests and they gave us the ability, or you the ability, to do that on your own. So certainly a really nice new feature. Well, we're going to jump into the kind of the heart of it here, and we're going to talk about AP. So obviously today's day and age, most of our bills come in via PDF. So we do want to automate that or integrate it. And rather than get an email with a PDF bill, print that bill, re-enter it in, the system can do a lot of this work for us. And it has the ability to do things manually or in an automated fashion. So before I show it, we do have the ability when setting up email accounts, and again, utilizing universal search at the very top of our screen. When we take a look at setting up an email account within Acumatica, system email accounts, we can integrate obviously to Google Mail, to Microsoft 365, wherever servers we may want to. When setting up email accounts in Acumatica, we have the ability to tell it if we're going to use incoming mail. So are we going to just use this for sending mail out, or are we also going to monitor this mailbox for incoming mail? And if we are monitoring this box for incoming mail, we have the ability to tell it, like an AP mailbox, that we want it to look for the attachments and automatically create incoming documents for mail that is sent to this mailbox. So you do have the ability here to monitor that incoming mail automatically. So if you have an AP mailbox, AP at, we can monitor that mailbox and we can automatically create AP bills based on that. You don't have to use this if you don't want. It is a nice feature, not required. Without it, and since I'm in a test company here, I do not have it turned on. So without it, I will be showing you how we can drag or drop and do them manually. But it would be as simple as turning this on and submit incoming documents is the feature for the AP document recognition. So you can see the PDF attachment is turning into bills right here. So setup wise, we do link it to a mailbox or multiple mailboxes and we turn on submit incoming documents. From here, underneath the payables module, we do have an incoming documents section. If I was doing it automatically, the system would automatically load anything that it sees on those email messages to this area of the software. If I'm doing it manually, I can certainly utilize my File Explorer. I can go to wherever I may have a document, and I have a folder here that I put a couple of fictitious invoices into, and I can drag and drop that right onto the screen. So I could certainly select multiple if I wanted to. We'll start with one, and I can simply drag and drop that right onto the screen if I want to. That's one way to load these into Acumatica. So I have the ability to do that. You can see the status is pending recognition. On all Acumatica screens that are enabled for processing, we have a scheduler built in. So if I wanted to automatically email invoices to a customer, order acknowledgements to a customer, purchase orders to a vendor, if I want to create shipments automatically, Those are all process screens within Acumatica, and so is incoming documents. So if I wanted to automatically set up recognition of AP bills on a schedule, I could do so here. If I want to manually recognize it, I could either click on this and hit recognize. I could recognize all, or I can open up the invoice. We'll see an image of it on the right-hand side, so we can see what this bill looks like. And we can ask Acumatica through its AI tools to go ahead and read the bill and figure out what information goes into what area. So we have the ability here for Acumatica to do its best to read each of the different areas of the software. If it doesn't find it, you have the ability to tell it where to search for different information. So this way it is learning as you do it. So you can see here, I can simply search Acumatica for it. I can tell it where on the invoice to look at. And this way in the future, it will recognize this vendor in the future. I don't have to program it. It learns as it goes. The total dollars, you can see it read it and it found it here. It found these items in here. Obviously, it read multiple lines. I can change that. So it can learn as we go. I don't need that line 3 or 4. So you do have the ability to really tell it exactly what to do with this. So it learns and it does a pretty good job on its own. You'll notice by me linking and putting the inventory ID in, it figured out the purchase order to link this to. So it's very common in the old days with how we used to scan bills. They wouldn't really work well with purchase orders. They would work great for expenses or professional services, but anything that came in via PO, maybe not so much. Well, in here, we certainly have the ability, even with purchase order, to reference those, and you'll see that as I go along. At this point, if we're happy with this bill, it's got everything we need. When we hit the save and continue button, or again, I could mass schedule these things, the system will take this and create an AP bill. You will notice on this AP bill exactly what we had down below. I also have one file attached. So after the bill is created, we do have an image of the bill here. If anybody ever has a question, we're able to see the invoice. But at this point, all of Acumatica's logic comes into play, right? And what I mean by that is in Acumatica, we have approval maps. So if you do build maps in the system that says, when I get a bill that relates to this GL account or for this vendor, or it's a purchase order, and I assume the PO was already approved, therefore the AP bill doesn't need to be, I could skip approval for anything tied to a PO if there's no variance. But you have the ability in here to build approval maps. These approval maps can have as many steps as you would want. So I could have an approval map. If it's less than X dollars, it requires no approval. If it's between 1,000 and 10,000, maybe it requires approval, and over 10,000, take it as a secondary. And you have the ability here to build these rules natively within Acumatica. And you can see we can check for almost anything. Is it tied to a PO? Who's the vendor? What vendor class it belongs to? What the total dollar amount of the bill is. And we can base our rules on any one of these things. We have a large client that does it based off of sub-account. They use that for regions, and it goes to different people, and they have multiple levels, 3 levels. It could go to the area manager, the district, or if it's over, I think in their case, $100,000, it can go to an executive. So approval mapping and approval matrix is all built into the system. So I know we did it very quickly, but underneath the payables tab, incoming documents, right? We had the ability pending processing. If I look at all records, we can see the one that has been processed. But we do have the ability here to automate this. So we can absolutely automate the incoming. We also have the ability to automatically schedule to recognize. Today, I believe this is PDF only. I don't think it's doing Excel. I know there's a question here about Excel. This here would be PDF for the AI tool. So it is something we can definitely take offline, but this would be PDF. Even with the manual dragging and dropping, I promised I would do multiple. So you can see I have, let's just take these two bills. I could drag and drop them multiple at once. We can see two that are pending processing. I could have this wait and go on a schedule. You can see the scheduler tool here. I have not set up a schedule, but to show you what that scheduler tool looks like, I could run it as many times as I want. I could have it run daily, weekly, monthly. Maybe I only need to run it Monday through Friday. I don't plan on entering or doing, hopefully, too much work on the weekends. That would be nice. I can tell it what hours to run between. So maybe run between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And I can tell it to check every 15 minutes for it. So every 15 minutes, if there's a new bill to recognize, it would automatically recognize it. So setting up a schedule is literally that easy within the software. Every 15 minutes between these times, it will run. One of the nice features of the scheduler is you can see this exact time option. Acumatica is going to monitor what's happening on your server, and it will, if exact time is not checked, if it is not, it will look for a period when the server utilization is not as high. So it may go at 8:01 instead of 8. And in something like incoming documents, it's not time critical. That would make sense. Why overburden the server if it's already high? If I do check exact time, it would force it, no matter what's happening, to go at that specific time. Again, something like this, it would not be necessary. So we've drug two invoices into the screen. We haven't recognized them yet. We can see they're pending. We can hit recognize all, and again, the scheduler ordinarily could do that for us. It's going to go ahead, it's going to attempt to read them, right? I haven't done any mapping like it used to be with OCR days. So back in the day, you would have to tell the system based on different vendors where fields were. This is not that by a long shot. So in here, we could click on one of these bills and we can see exactly what it did. So this is go to vendor, right? And it could figure that out based on their logo. The date it pulled from invoice date. It read, it figured out the difference between the invoice date and the due date. We didn't have to tell it, it was able to read those fields, right? We got the invoice number from up here. It's figuring this out for us, right? It's pulled in as much of this data as it can. And again, it can map to purchase orders if we had a PO related. This one has a PO here. We could tell it to pull the PO from this area. So it is doing everything it can. We can then save and continue or automate that. Brings in the AP bill. So this is native Acumatica. Acumatica, good news for most of the people on the call. If you're already an Acumatica user, this used to be, and it still is, an additional module, don't get me wrong, but they have made it easier for you. And they they include, I'm sure you pay for it. They include, I believe it's 50 or 100 transactions a month at no additional cost. You used to have to pay even for one transaction. Once you go over that 50 or 100, we then do sell, or they do sell it in a pack. I believe it's 3,000 or 5,000 is the next pack. Not a very expensive module, but it does give you this ability to integrate to a mailbox, to read AP bills, to attach them to invoices, attach them to purchase orders, and then simply turn them into bills. Much better than keying in data, a lot less error rate, right? It's doing it all for you. It's doing a much better job of typing than we do. We make a lot more errors as opposed to software and it is able to build all of that up. So questions, please keep them coming. I know there are a couple in here. If we do have, can it read multiple stacked invoices in the same PDF? If one PDF has multiple invoices, if we had one email that had 3 attachments on it, that it can read and segregate. I think if it's one PDF document with multiple invoice numbers, I don't believe it does that today. I do believe we need that. This can do both bills and credit memos, I believe. So the type of transaction, I believe it can handle both bills and credit memos. I will confirm. I've never honestly tried a credit memo, but I believe it does. So I think it can be smart enough to read bill versus credit adjustment. And you can also easily toggle between those if it doesn't, but I believe it can do a pretty good job there. So again, easily created, files attached here. Anything missing, all in this case, we require a project if we do. So you can see everything tied to these, all Acumatica logic, approval maps, everything like that is absolutely still intact, and the ability to do every one of those things. So it is nice where every one of those features is still built into the software. We're not bypassing any functionality. It's every bit as powerful as Acumatica. So I know a couple of other questions here that we'll keep going, but can I? So just looking at some of these, user sees where they have an invoice to approve. So I did talk a little bit about approvals, and I can definitely show that. So typically speaking, with approvals, we will add it to dashboards. So what happens is when there is some bill to be approved, and I'm going to go ahead into payables, open up the bill and adjustment screen. I have not put an approval rule here. I may even toggle over to sales orders where I do have one just to show, but you can see this approval tab. So on the bill and adjustment screen, if this bill required approvals or multiple approvals, I would be able to see what is required here. And also, for all of history, as things are approved, we would keep a full history of who approved it and when. An approval can go to an individual and or a work group. So it can go to one or many. Now, I understand the question, which is great. We have a bill that requires approval. John Doe needs to approve it. When John Doe logs into Acumatica, well, how do they know they have something to approve? And there's a number of ways to answer that. One is we can notify them via email, via text message, or via dashboard or task that there is something for them to approve. So typically speaking, on their dashboard, we would have an item that would show them their approvals. You can also see underneath this menu option, this task of approvals. So you can see these different approvals that are waiting for me at the moment. These are any that are in my court, and I could read them. I could open up the related documents if I so choose, or I could check the box and approve them. So you can see I've opened up the document here. I can approve or reject. If I do reject, I can put notes on why I'm rejecting it, would go back to the originator. In this case, I approved it. It will come off of my list. I'm now down to 3 items to approve. So we can notify people via email. We can put it on their dashboards. We do have a menu option for it. We can send text messages. And if they use our mobile app, we can do push notifications to a mobile device. Any one of those would be valid ways to notify somebody of a pending approval. So hopefully that makes some sense. We definitely handle multiple lines mapping to different GL accounts. So how do we determine on these AP bills, we have a vendor, we have an item, different items based on the expense account of the item may link to different GL accounts. So in the settings of Acumatica, we can tell it where to look for the GL account number. So when we set up AP and the bills, if we are referencing item numbers, I can have those pull different GL account numbers. If it is more of a services related bill and I don't have items, it does pull one default GL account. And that GL account in that case would be stored at the vendor level. So if we take a look at a vendor, it would in here, underneath the general ledger accounts, we would default to the expense account for the vendor. So if we don't handle or we don't get inventory or PO related data, the expense account would be the default in that case. Couple of other things, freight is added as a line item. So it does do a good job with freight. If we looked at the incoming document, and I would encourage you outside of this meeting, we've done this individually for a number of clients in the past where we can get on together, we can show you in our test environment, if you send us a couple of different sample bills from your vendors, and I've seen some doozies, some really complicated bills that are very hard to read, we can put them through this engine and we can look at how it does. So I know I've put in some samples here and they're pretty simple invoices, but if you wanted to take a vendor of yours that has an invoice that's not so easy to read and you want us to see how Acumatica would do with it, I'm more than happy to do it. I don't want to share any of them that have been sent to me from individuals on a group call, but individually, I'd be more than happy to take some invoices, but it will absolutely read freight. It will create a line item down here for freight. And again, based on the item or whatnot, we can map it. So yeah, we can absolutely handle freight. We can handle sales tax. It does create transaction detail lines for freight and sales tax. You guys you're active today. I love it. I love the questions. Nothing like giving a presentation, having no feedback. So the feedback is awesome. I definitely appreciate it. This is one of the, it's a really important thing, and it's been getting a lot of topic and press today even, right? We're seeing so much out there about artificial intelligence, and well, I guess soon I won't have to come into work or something. AI is going to do my job for me. We're not quite there yet, but the ability for, especially on the AP side, I know I have clients asking me on sales order side, can I do the same thing? And that's coming, right? We don't have it today, but I would expect to see the ability to take a PO from a customer to put it into a process and have Acumatica create the sales order for you. I'm sure I don't have any insight, but I'm sure we're not far from that. So I do have clients asking about that. And yeah, it's not far-fetched, right? The more things we can do, back in the day with scanners, when we started scanning shipments and scanning inventory moves, right? The accuracy of those scans is far better than an individual typing it. Well, AI is no different. Far, far better and far, far faster than something we could do manually. So I will spend a little bit more time on approval rules since it really does tie to this. And I did see questions around that, and we do have 30 minutes remaining. So if you do think of some additional questions specifically around scanning, feel free. But the idea of this was, how can we really streamline AP bills? And the approval process is a big part of it. So I did quickly show, but we will go in here and we will build a map together. So we can go under the approval maps and we have the ability to create an AP bill approval map. We can name this anything we'd like. It's totally up to us. And we tell Acumatica what we're talking about. So this is going to be integrating to the bill and adjustment screen. I mentioned that we could be multi-step. So you can see in here, and we do have the ability to name these steps and name these rules. So I could be as generic as step 1, or I could tell it that I'm checking first for PO or something else. My first rule maybe is its amount greater than $1,000 as an example. So in the first step, I'm going to have a rule here. You can see in the step, if no approver is defined, it'll skip the step. When do I execute? What do I do? Well, we need to build the rules around this. And you can see, well, based on the description, I'm not going to be super creative here. We're going to go in here and we're going to say that on the AP document, the amount of the document is greater than or equal to $1,000. So this very first step has that rule. The rule actions, who does it go to? So when this condition is met, and I can continue the criteria as many as I'd like, but when that is met, what do? We can go to an individual employee. We can pull an employee from the transaction. So I was giving you an example of that large client before. Well, if we were using projects as an example, we have something called a project manager. So if I wanted the approval to go to the project manager, I could read the project from the document and then pull the project manager. I could filter employees, so I could come up here with a list of employees or look for different types of employees and do that employees by filter. Otherwise, I could choose an individual employee. We'll go with Maxwell Baker. That's how I'm logged in. Or I could go to a work group where we define a group of people. Either works, individual or work group. If we do go to either one, allow reassignment. This is a feature that came out, I believe, in our previous release. It would be, unfortunately, I'm just back from vacation, but if I was going on vacation, I can build a rule in here that says I'm going to be out from this time to this time, and I can forward my approvals to somebody else. So I have the ability to reassign my approvals based on out of office or whatever that may be. So I can certainly allow that. And then decision times. How long do we think this should take us? And it'll turn red and notify when it takes longer. So how long do we expect somebody to approve it? I did see a question about departments. In Acumatica, we call them sub-accounts, and we absolutely can map based off of sub-account. So you can imagine the sub-account may be at the transaction level. Document would be the header, transaction would be the line. And I would have the ability here to pull in general ledger sub-account fields. So yes, the ability to track things at a sub-account, and I can start typing here. You can see sub-account, and notice we get Acumatica interface. So when the bill relates to consulting versus operations versus purchasing, I could go to different approvers. Absolutely, sub-account would be more than viable and very common. So we can absolutely do sub-account as well. I see some things popping up. If I missed your question, I'm sorry. We have some using questions and answers, some using chat. I know Frank mentioned chat, so I'm trying to keep an eye on Frank. Keep me honest if I'm doing a bad job or missing some people. So multiple approvals, I will show you that here. So I'll skip the department, but I certainly could do department. Let's say we did build this rule. If it's over $1,000, it goes to Maxwell Baker. I'm going to add another step here. And we're going to say amount greater than $10,000. And if I could spell, that would read amount. And now we can do the same thing, conditions. We want where the document amount is greater than or equal to 10,000. And in this case, who will I go to approval? I'm just going to choose somebody other than Maxwell Baker. So we can choose a different resource in here. Doesn't really matter in this case. So we can definitely just go to somebody other than Maxwell Baker. So in this case, we built a rule, or we've built a map, two rules, 10,000 over 10,000. This one is a great start. Is marked active, but we also need to turn it on in the module. So in this case, if we go into the payables module underneath accounts payable preferences, we would, under approval maps here, you can see we already have a couple of maps turned on, but I'm going to go ahead on our AP bill. I'm going to use the brand new one that we just did, which was this right here. So it is active. The other ones were not. They are sample ones that come with the system. In this case, we're going to have that here. When I have an AP bill, whatever that AP bill may be, when we remove the bill from hold is when it is going and looking at those rules. So if we do take a look at any AP bill on hold, for those not as familiar with Acumatica, I could filter on the status screen. I could filter on hold only. And here's a list of every AP bill on hold. I could click on the AP bill that I want to talk about, and I'll probably be changing this bill. Right now it's $744. I could remove it from hold. You'll notice the status goes to balanced. Did not go waiting for approval or do anything. And that's because it's under the $1,000. So we did not require approval here. We were underneath our conditions. If I enter a new AP bill manually, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it doesn't matter if it's scanned or manually entered, same engine, same rule. I'm not going to link it to an inventory ID, but we'll do it for $1,500 in this case. And I can save this as long as I fill in all of the information. It does require a project in here and a task. I can now save it. When I remove it from hold, notice the status goes to pending approval. So since this was over $1,000, the criteria that we defined was met. At this point, it does require approval. Who needs to approve it? We can click on the approvals tab and we can see that this is pending right now, Maxwell Baker approving it. I mentioned dashboards for Maxwell Baker to see, push notifications, email, text message, perhaps carrier pigeon, I'm not sure, but we can do just about anything with it. He would get notified about this. If I look at my approvals area, I would be able to see, if I was logged in as Maxwell Baker, I would be able to see that information. I'm going to go ahead and approve it. You will see the history of approvals. So if we do go ahead and do this $1,500 one, when I do approve it, you'll notice underneath the approval tab, who approved it, the date, and the status. Would have helped if I saved it before. So we can see that. Now I will do one more for $15,000 as an example. And on that one, we will only be able to go so far. So in that case, it's going to be a bit different. So we'll go ahead and we'll enter it in for, in this case, 15,000. We will associate it to a project. And project is something that I turned on in this test company. It is not required for everybody by any stretch of the imagination. It would be great if I found a valid project. Let me get an internal project here. I am striking out on projects, of course. Why would I find one that I wanted to use internal? Well, for fun, we can definitely go and look at what GL accounts are valid for that one. It may be faster than me doing that. For those that, again, Acumatica, remember, we are browser-based. You can duplicate tabs. If I take a look at one of these projects just to make sure I am getting a valid GL account, and again, I wouldn't expect everybody to be using our project module. It is a full-fledged project accounting module where we can budget by project and we can validate expenses to make sure that when we're coding things to a project that we are not exceeding what the budget was. So you can see I have a cost budget here. We can see the different account groups that have budget here. So something like other expenses or travel or burden. And I would be able to take a look at those account groups and see which GL accounts are linked to them. So you can see, for example, we saw travel there. Let's say we have a $15,000 travel expense. Here's a list of GL accounts, 63200 as an example, that is linked to that section. So we can see now that we have that budgeted, it will allow entry of it.
Yeah, we have
But
quite
the
a
point,
few questions coming in on both sides. So if you want to take a look at the chat first, just to confirm you covered all that.
I would love to. So notice here, just to show approvals, the big thing was 2 now, right? We no longer have 1 approval, 2 approvers. So 2 approvers at this point. Awesome. So I think I'm going to focus on the chat here. I don't see anything new on the Q&A. So I know I answered about freight and sales tax. GL accounts because of freight bills based on type of shipment. So again, the best the system could do from a GL account perspective would be the default based on an item or a vendor. Now within Acumatica, you could do something after the fact. And if we had one generic GL account and then we wanted to allocate that based on invoices, based on anything, revenue dollars, other things like that, we could build allocation rules, but something we could probably take offline. Can a vendor have an approver? Absolutely. If I wanted to, when I did that approval map, just to show you, so when we did the approval maps and we added it, man, the fingers don't want to work. Part of that criteria when I did this is I could add in here my vendor. So who is my vendor? So when the vendor equals this number, so when vendor equals this, it goes to this person for approval. I could add a field on the vendor for it. So yes, absolutely, we could. If you wanted to go that finite, you could. We see it a lot based off of GL account ranges as well. So we could put it by vendor. I do see GL accounts pretty common. I mentioned sub accounts for departments, absolutely native. Prepayment invoices. Good question. I don't know. So I will get back. We will be recording these. So there are a couple that we will have to follow up on. I don't know if it would do prepayment. I don't see why it wouldn't, but I will mock one up and confirm it. I will absolutely confirm it. As I mentioned, this process with the AI is literally mimicking keystroke, if you will. So if we do have a purchase price variance, the system will bring it in just like a manual PO. And then based on your thresholds, it could require approval. So again, in that example I gave, we've done this before where if the AP bill ties to the PO and there are no variances, no approval required. If there is a variance, we then require approval. If you want to limit the variance, if it's if it's under $5, just go. If it's over $5, those rules can be built into the engine. So you have the ability to go ahead and do that right within. And then multi-step process, we can absolutely do multi-step. I know there's an example here in the chat. If a service was completed, then go to someone to approve the actual invoice. So in that case, as long as you're saying we had a PO, the PO was received. If I'm looking for that receiver, yeah, you can see when I go to add the conditions in here, I can go out to the purchase receipt. So I can actually see the quantity on the receipt. So I can definitely compare to purchase order. I can compare to purchase receipt. I can look at departments or sub accounts, dollars, employees, vendors, vendor classes. If I want to make it a little bit more generic than specifying individual vendors, I could say when the vendor belongs to this vendor class equals this. We ideally, as more generic as possible, the less rules we build. There's nothing wrong with complex or multiple rules, but certainly if we can limit, I guess, the maintenance, the better. But yes, you can go to specific vendors, group of vendors. You can look at receiving documents, purchase order documents, employee documents, you name it. Multi-level, absolutely, multiple levels of it. I know we have clients using at least 3 levels. There's no limit. 3 is just what I've seen used. Doesn't mean 3 is the max. We've done 3 though, a number of times. So great questions. As I said, this has been extremely interactive. We do have a couple follow-ups and we will send it out to the attendees. Any questions, do not hesitate to ask. If you don't think about it on the call, inevitably when you hang up is when you'll think about the 5 things you forgot to ask. At least that's how it works for me. You can definitely reach out to Frank, myself, Dean, any one of our team members, James, anybody on this call. We will get that in the appropriate hands and we will get back to you. But yeah, between monitoring an email box, watching for emails coming in with PDF attachments, creating the AP bill, recognizing the AP bill, looking at the approval maps, determining who should approve, if anybody should approve, and then automatically putting it on a dashboard or notifying them. And then as soon as it's notified, that bill is eligible to be released. That process that today is probably very manual should become very automated in the future. And you can see there's no reason with the technology we have today why we would not be able to automate that. As I said, tasks, approvals, things like that. We practice what we preach. We use Acumatica. We use Acumatica tasks. Our internal dashboards, I'm on a demo company here, but our internal dashboards absolutely have a widget on them with a list of our open tasks by individual. So when we look at our dashboards, one of the items there is a list of approvals. Notice on this dashboard, payments to apply as an example, but I absolutely can have AR bills to approve, or if we go to a payables dashboard, AP bills to approve. That could absolutely be right on this dashboard. So there is no reason not to show. You can see documents to approve, payments to approve right here. So click into it. If they had anything to approve, it would show right on this view here. I know we have about 10 minutes left. If there are any additional questions, I do see some more chat.
Yeah, they're coming in. They keep coming in. It's good.
I like it. I like it. So in here, vendor classes, I would love to explain vendor classes. Let's start with that. So I know, the nature of our business, at least we started with a product called McCullough. We supported McCullough for a long time. And then we added Acumatica to our portfolio about 8 years ago. I know we do have a lot of people on this call that are familiar with McCullough terminology. So vendor classes in Acumatica is a way to group vendors, and it's also used for creating new vendors and making it a lot easier. So defaults can be defined at the vendor class level and then also running reports. In McCullough, you can think of something like vendor type. That would be as close to an equivalent as I have with a vendor class. So if I go to create a new vendor inside of Acumatica, you can see one of the very first questions it asks me is a vendor class. And when I select this vendor class of services or product, you'll notice that a lot of information will default. My GL accounts all defaulted based on the selection of this vendor class. The terms code for the vendor defaulted based on the vendor class. The primary payment method defaulted. So if we look at the definition of vendor class, I have the ability to default any of this information based on a vendor class. But it can also be used for reporting and also be used for approval rules. So absolutely, vendor class is a good way to segregate it. When I was talking about the automation, if we follow that through, right, we talked about monitoring a mailbox. That mailbox would bring documents in. We could schedule them to be recognized. We could create the AP bill. The AP bill will come in on hold, and that's an option. We don't have to take it on hold. As soon as it comes off hold and we don't need to use the on hold at all, it would check for approvals and go out for approvals. At that point, the status would be balanced until one of two things. It could require the user to release it individually. On the payables option, I mentioned about process grids. Well, notice here we have a process grid for release AP documents. So instead of individually releasing AP bills, I could go to this and I could release a bunch at once. I could do that manually, or everybody on the call should be an expert now. I could build a schedule to automatically release AP bills. So it is not far-fetched to have a PDF come to a mailbox for an AP bill, have it come in and be recognized, have the AP bill be created, have it go out for approval. Once it's approved, have it automatically on an automation schedule be released, and it's now open in AP to be paid. The general ledger entries are done, and we're now waiting to pay it. So there is, while we do need to release it, there is automation that we can build to release it. So this is becoming much more hands-off. As long as the setup and criteria is defined well in advance, we really should be able to run in a fairly automated function. There would be no reason not to.
And Jeff, would Alexa be able to tell you what's been sent out already after that's been done?
Years ago, I saw integration with Alexa. I haven't seen it since. I don't know the practicality in the business world. I'm not sure, but I'm sure we could do smoke signals or something. Awesome. I do appreciate everybody's time. I know we have about 8 minutes, so if there aren't any more questions, I will let you go early and you can finish that lunch that you were able to order. I hope everybody took something at least away from this. If you do have questions, don't hesitate. As I said, our team is here to help. This is what we live and thrive on, right? We love streamlining processes, making your daily lives easier. That is what we focus on. So please, any questions, anything that you can think of that we may have missed, things that you'd like us to run through, or again, that offer is open. If you have some AP bills and you'd like to send them to us and get on a call, we'll put them into Acumatica and we'll see how it does in reading them. That offer is open. So please take advantage of it. I do appreciate it. Any other questions, feel free to reach out, but Frank, I'll let you kind of, I guess, bring it home and end it.
Yeah, I mean, we're on Teams and there is the, the reaction tool. So I would love to see kind of a reaction, whether it was good, throw a thumbs up or a heart. If it was shocking and not worth your time, put the shocked face up. That'd be good to see. Let me give you an example. There you go.
We got something. There we go.
Awesome. And so, yeah, so the next event that we're going to be hosting is some cool stuff. It's regarding Asgard Alliance is going to be showing us the freedom and power of printing labels through integration with Acumatica. So look for that event that's going to be coming out shortly to your mailboxes. Other than that, yeah, I appreciate everybody's attendance, and again, I hope this was worth your time. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.